Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Wisconsin, protesters took to the state capitol Monday evening to oppose an effort by Republican state lawmakers to push through a series of bills to strip power from incoming Democratic Governor Tony Evers before he takes office. Protesters flooded the Capitol building, chanting, "Respect our votes," and "Shame." The bills aim to limit the power of the Democratic governor and attorney general-elect and would restrict early voting periods. The Republicans drafted the legislation after Republican Governor Scott Walker lost a close race to Evers in November. In North Carolina, election officials are investigating possible fraud in a tight congressional election that remains uncalled nearly 1 month after the midterm elections. Unofficial results have Republican Mark Harris leading Democrat Dan McCready by just over 900 votes. The investigation centers on a number of absentee ballots which appear to have been signed by witnesses who have ties to Leslie McCrae Dowless, a Republican operative who worked for Harris. Dowless pleaded guilty to insurance fraud in the 90s after he took out a $163,000 policy in a dead man, according to court records. Additionally, a disproportionately high number of requested absentee ballots were not returned in a county that favored Harris in both the primary and general elections. The North Carolina Elections Board may decide to hold a new election if they're unable to declare a winner. President Trump lashed out at special counsel Robert Mueller and his own former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, on Twitter Monday. Trump responded to Cohen's lawyer's request for prison time served by tweeting Cohen deserves, quote, a full and complete sentence. Last week, Cohen pleaded guilty to lying to Congress to help cover for Trump. Trump also praised his longtime advisor, Roger Stone, for having, quote, guts for agreeing not to testify against him. Some experts, including George Conway, litigator and husband of White House counselor Kellyanne Conway, have said the tweet amounts to witness tampering, which is considered an obstruction of justice. Special counsel Mueller is expected to file a sentencing memo today for Michael Flynn and sentencing memos for Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort in the coming days. CIA Director Gina Haspel is set to brief senators on the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi today. She'll reportedly meet with a small number of top members of the Armed Services Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, and the Intelligence Committee. Last week, Haspel was reportedly blocked from a congressional briefing, prompting outrage from senators who instead had a closed-door meeting with Defense Secretary James Mattis and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Haspel's the only high-level U.S. official to have heard the tape of Khashoggi's murder after other members of the administration, including Trump himself, refused to listen to it. In Spain, the far-right Vox party won multiple seats in a regional parliamentary election in Andalusia Sunday, the first successful election for the far-right in Spain since the country returned to democracy in the 70s after the death of military dictator Francisco Franco. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon threw his support behind Vox early this year and has apparently been advising the far-right party. Vox campaigned on an anti-immigrant, anti-abortion platform, as many worried about the rise of fascist political populism in Spain. In France, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has suspended fuel tax hikes in an attempt to quell the growing tension between President Macron's government and protesters. An 80-year-old woman reportedly died over the weekend after a tear gas canister flew into her home, hitting her in the face. More than 400 protesters were arrested across France over the weekend. In Paris, cars and several buildings were set on fire, windows were smashed, police fired tear gas, stun grenades, and water cannons at protesters. Multiple journalists have reported being attacked by protesters since the demonstrations started, both in person and online. Qatar announced plans to withdraw from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, known as OPEC, after over 50 years of membership. Several OPEC members, including Saudi Arabia, have cut off trade with Qatar since 2017, accusing the country of supporting terrorists after it reestablished diplomatic ties with Iran. Newly inaugurated Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador is following up on a campaign promise to create a Truth and Justice Commission to investigate the 2014 disappearance of 43 students from a teachers' college in the town of Ayotzinapa in Guerrero. The students were attacked by local police as they headed to a protest and are presumed dead. International experts say the Mexican military and federal police also played a role in their disappearances. In news from the Philippines, the founder of the independent news site, The Rappler, has returned to the country despite facing an arrest warrant on tax evasion charges. Maria Ressa was in the United States, where she received multiple press freedom awards when she and her organization were indicted in what is widely viewed as an attack against the press by the authoritarian Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte. On Monday, Ressa posted bail but vowed to continue reporting.
I am not a criminal. I have been a journalist my entire life. I will continue to hold the government accountable.
Maria Ressa is due to appear in court later this week. Visit our website, democracynow.org, to see our interviews with her. A U.S. admiral found dead at his home in Bahrain over the weekend reportedly died by suicide. Vice Admiral Scott Sterney oversaw U.S. naval forces in the Middle East. Back in the United States, calls are growing for Texas to halt its executions after BuzzFeed revealed the state buys its lethal injection drugs from a Houston pharmacy whose license has been on probation since 2016. As they were dying, 5 of the 11 prisoners Texas executed this year said their bodies felt like they were burning after they were injected. The process is supposed to be painless. 2 more executions are scheduled this month, including one tonight. Gloria Ruback of the Texas death penalty abolition movement protested Monday outside Green Park, compounding pharmacy and gifts.
Let us know now that you will stop making compounding lethal injection drugs. If you do not, you will face an international campaign to boycott your business, and we will shut you down.
In St. Louis, 3 police officers were indicted last week in the assault of an undercover police officer at a 2017 protest. The undercover officer, who is black, was at a demonstration protesting the fatal police shooting of 24-year-old Anthony Lamar Smith when officers Dustin Boone, Randy Hayes, and Christopher Myers violently attacked the veteran police officer, kicking and beating him with a baton and causing serious injuries. A 4th officer, Bailey Coletta, was indicted for her role in helping to cover up the attack. Before the attack, the officers exchanged messages suggesting they, quote, whoop some ass and, quote, grab and toss protesters around. In Alabama, an autopsy of the man shot dead by police Thanksgiving Day after reportedly being mistaken for a gunman revealed he was shot 3 times in the back. 21-year-old Mantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr. was killed by police after they responded to a shooting at a mall in a suburban Birmingham where 2 teenagers were injured. A lawyer for Bradford's family says the autopsy confirms the victim was not a threat and that he was moving away from the police. Nexstar Media Group has announced it'll acquire Tribune Media for over $4 billion, making it the largest provider of local television stations in the United States. In August, Tribune Media pulled out of a proposed merger with right-wing Sinclair Broadcast Group. The FCC had expressed concerns about the merger with Sinclair despite rolling back rules that prevented consolidation in local media markets in 2017. And in Canada, Indigenous activists have been physically blocking the construction of the largest fracking project in Canada's history. Members of the Unistataklan stopped TransCanada Corporation workers from entering their territory on November 20th. The land on the western coast of Canada is in the path of the planned $4.7 billion Coastal GasLink pipeline. Last week, TransCanada applied for an injunction against the Indigenous community in an attempt to gain access to the land. This is Frida Hewson, a spokesperson for the camp.
The project's going to impact our waters, our salmon, our berries, our medicines, and everything that is our critical infrastructure is at risk. If the court grants them that injunction, that gives the police the right to try and come in and do a raid and take us down, which they would try to take us out of our own home, which we haven't committed no crime. We're just living on our land. We've never ceded or surrendered our land. We've never lost it through treaty or any other means, and we've never given up our decision-making power to any outside entities.
And a correction to an earlier story. Edouard Philippe is the Prime Minister of France. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.